You think someone like you has $1 million just sitting in an account here? Prove it, or get out. The words rang out across the cold, echo-prone lobby like a judge's gavel slammed in the wrong courtroom. Langston Merriweather didn't flinch, not even a blink. He stood in the center of the branch lobby at Trinity Bank on Oak Ridge Avenue in downtown Milwaukee, his expression unreadable. His grip tightened slightly on his leather wallet, worn at the edges and stitched with the initials of the man who gave it to him. His father. The same father who once said, "Son, some rooms you walk into, you'll have to prove your worth twice before they'll see your name once." Today was one of those rooms. The voice that had shouted belonged to Deborah Whitlow, the branch manager. She hadn't even attempted to lower her voice. If anything, she had said it louder than necessary. Loud enough for the suited man scrolling on his phone near the wall of investment brochures to pause mid-scroll. Loud enough for the elderly woman placing a check in her purse to look up, her lips parting in surprise. Loud enough for the man behind Langston in line to lean forward slightly. Interested now. Langston exhaled through his nose. Not in frustration. In memory. He'd been here before, many times, in different banks, in different cities, under different names and rules, but the pattern was always the same. Only now, this pattern had circled back to a branch with his company's name printed on the glass. He hadn't come dressed in anything special. A plain black crewneck, dark denim, black boots. He blended into the city. That was the point. No assistants, no chauffeurs, no gold watch flashing under a cufflink, just a man making a withdrawal. And that, apparently, was too much. Deborah had crossed her arms now. She stood behind the middle counter with the stance of someone who believed she was in the right and had policy at her back, her lips curled into the kind of smile people wear when they feel both powerful and unthreatened. Langston's voice was even. "I'm here to initiate a wire transfer. $1 million from my account." She didn't even glance at the screen. "From your account?" Her brow arched, incredulous. "Yes." The teller next to her, Clinton Reddick by his nameplate, snorted softly. He was tall, his dress shirt starched too tightly around the collar, and his eyes didn't hide his amusement. "And which account would that be, sir?" Langston slid his card across the counter. "Executive tier account, ending in 47-22. Deborah looked down but didn't pick it up. Instead, she studied Langston's face. "You'll need to provide additional identification and proof of funds. That's standard for unusual activity." "This isn't unusual," Langston replied. "It's my account. My name matches the card and my ID." A third employee approached. Young, eyes alert, name tag reading Janine Croft. She said nothing at first, just leaned over to get a look at the card. Then she reached out, snatched it before Langston could react, and slipped it into the drawer under the counter. With a metallic click, she locked it. "This looks suspicious," she said, folding her arms. "Honestly, you probably stole it." The room stilled. Even the slight whir of the printer in the back seemed to hesitate. A woman near the indoor plant whispered, "Did she just say that?" Langston said nothing. He wasn't frozen. He wasn't stunned. He was waiting. He glanced around. The light above was cold and sterile. Fluorescent fixtures lined the ceiling like a hospital. Behind the counters, the walls were plastered with images of smiling customers, retirees shaking hands with advisors, young families signing mortgage contracts, all under the tagline, "Bank with Confidence." Confidence was a luxury they clearly didn't believe he was entitled to. The lobby smelled of lemon-scented floor cleaner and a faint tinge of coffee. The tension now added a new scent, the sharpness of embarrassment, shame, defiance. To Langston's left, a customer had already begun filming. Sharon Kleinman, 30-something, white, dressed in a navy business dress and heels. She held her phone up steadily, her voice firm. "This is racial profiling," she said loudly, "and I'm documenting it." Her voice broke the moment into two pieces. Before Sharon, the staff had plausible deniability. After her, they had an audience. Deborah's tone sharpened. "Ma'am, please lower your phone. You're not authorized to record inside this bank." "I'm not stopping," Sharon replied. "Not while you treat him like a criminal." A few murmurs rose from other customers now, soft at first. Langston still hadn't moved. Inside, a fire that had long smoldered flickered. Not rage, resolve. He had spent a lifetime learning to manage that fire. He knew what happened when you let it out too soon. He knew the power of waiting for the right moment. Then a young teller near the edge of the counter stepped forward. Her badge read, Naomi Fields. Her voice was quieter than Sharon's, but no less resolute. "Miss Whitlow," she said to Deborah, "this customer hasn't done anything wrong." Deborah's gaze snapped to her. "Naomi, step back. This doesn't concern you." Naomi didn't move. "You didn't check the account. You didn't verify the card. You locked it away because of how he looks." Deborah's lips tightened. "Watch your tone." Clinton stepped forward now, putting his hand on the glass barrier that separated the teller line from the public. "Final warning," he said. "Leave the branch, or we call the police." Sharon gasped. "He's a client. You haven't even verified anything." Langston reached into his coat pocket, not quickly, not suddenly, and pulled out his phone. He pressed one button and raised it to his ear. "Avery," he said calmly. "We're live now. Begin internal monitoring." A voice replied on the other end, sharp and clean. "Understood. Feed is active. Recording audio, time-stamped." Naomi's breath caught, just audible enough for Clinton to notice. He looked from her to Langston, then back again. "You're ruining this bank," Langston said quietly, eyes on Deborah now. "Not because of one action, because of a pattern." Deborah slammed a button under the counter. Somewhere behind the scenes, a red light blinked. "Security escalation in process," she said coldly. "We take fraud very seriously." "Do you?" Langston replied. "Or do you just take me seriously when I wear a suit?" Another flash came to him. Different branch, different year. He had just closed a major investment deal, walked into a bank to move funds. The teller had smiled tightly and asked if he had authorization. His name was on every line of the papers. Still, they had called for confirmation. They hadn't believed he could be the one. That memory faded as Clinton moved forward again. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Naomi stepped in front of him. "You can't touch him." Clinton's face twisted. "Stay out of this." "I am in this," Naomi snapped, her voice rising. "This is my workplace, and this is not policy." Her defiance rang out. Customers murmured again. One elderly man stepped forward. "Are you going to do this to every black man who walks in here?" Deborah shot back. "We treat everyone the same." "No, you don't," Sharon said. "And we're all seeing it now." Langston looked at Naomi. "You're going to be all right," he said. She nodded, but her hands were trembling slightly. Still, she didn't move. Then Janine leaned closer to the intercom, speaking as if reading from a manual. "This man is impersonating a client. Do not assist him." Langston took a breath. Long, measured. He turned to Clinton. "You put your hands on me, I will consider it assault." Clinton hesitated. Janine looked ready to explode. Deborah's jaw clenched so tight her temples pulsed. Langston looked back at Deborah. "I'm not leaving," he said, voice low, carrying more weight than if he had shouted. "But you might be." "Are you recording this?" Sharon whispers. "Because I am." Her phone is already on, flashing red. A second light flickers just a few feet away. Terence Delgado's phone, now held vertically, streaming live to Reddit. His caption is simple: "Banking while black in Milwaukee. Live." Langston stands in the middle of the lobby, completely still. His card is gone, locked away. His ID has been dismissed. His intentions questioned. But he hasn't raised his voice. He hasn't flinched. And yet the room around him is growing louder. The edges of the moment tremble with the tension of dozens of eyes trying to decide if they're witnesses or participants. He remembers something he said in a boardroom not 3 weeks ago. "You won't find this in spreadsheets," he told his executives. Bias doesn't live in data. It lives in tone, in how long someone waits, in who's believed first. He hadn't known he would be living those words in real time. The goal today was never to make noise. It was to confirm something. The internal reports, the anonymous complaints, they hinted at a problem. But problems dressed up as procedure are harder to see, and harder still to uproot. Now he's here, in the branch that bears his company's name. And suddenly, what was hidden is being unmasked. It's just past 10 in the morning. The lobby of Trinity Bank feels frozen. Milwaukee's sunlight gleams off the marble floors, but the warmth doesn't reach the people inside. The air smells like pine cleaner and printer ink. A soft whir from the HVAC system blends with the background hum of tension and disbelief. Sharon has taken a step closer to the counter. Her voice is firm. "This is racial profiling, and it's not just wrong, it's illegal." Deborah Whitlow stiffens at the challenge. Her hands, once neatly folded, now grip the edge of her workstation. "Ma'am, we're following protocol. If you continue interfering—" "No," Sharon says, voice sharper now. "You didn't follow protocol. You skipped protocol. You went straight to accusation." From behind Deborah, Clinton Reddick glances toward the entrance, perhaps hoping a security guard will enter. But none come. The bank doesn't have physical security, never needed it before. That was part of its public image. Clean, safe, selective. "Final warning," Clinton says to Langston, stepping from behind the counter. His shoes click sharply against the tile. "You're making a scene. If you don't leave—" "He hasn't raised his voice once," Sharon interrupts. "This scene? You made it." Langston doesn't move. His hands remain visible, relaxed at his sides. His voice is a low current beneath the chaos. "I came to make a transaction," he says. "You turned it into something else." The line behind him is no longer just a cue. It's a cross-section of the city. A woman in scrubs stares, her eyebrows drawn together in concern. A man in a construction vest mutters under his breath, but doesn't look away. A teenager in a hoodie watches with wide eyes, her phone lifted now too. Naomi Fields steps forward, slowly, carefully. "Miss Whitlow," she says, "can I speak with you for a moment? Privately." Deborah's nostrils flare. "No, not now." Naomi stays where she is. "He's not a threat. You didn't even look up his name." Clinton takes another step toward Langston. This time he reaches out, brushing Langston's elbow. Sharon gasps. "Don't touch him," she snaps. "He hasn't done anything." Langston's voice doesn't rise, but it hardens. "You're one push away from a lawsuit." Naomi rushes between them. Her arms spread slightly, as if her body alone could hold back what's happening. "You can't put your hands on him," she says, her voice trembling but clear. That's not protocol. That's not anything. Clinton's eyes flicker, but he doesn't retreat. Janine Croft speaks into the intercom from behind the glass. This man is impersonating a client. Do not assist him. The sentence lands like a slap. Langston's shoulders stay square, but his jaw tightens. Naomi flinches. Several customers recoil audibly. One woman says aloud, "Is this really happening?" Terrence's voice comes from the back. "Yep, and it's live. Thousands watching." Deborah, now visibly rattled, leans toward Naomi. "You're embarrassing yourself," she hisses. Naomi's response is quiet, but cutting. "No, I'm trying to stop you from destroying your career." The tension is no longer just about Langston. It's about the bank, the brand, the illusion of professionalism crumbling in real time. A young man in the corner speaks up for the first time. "My dad had an account frozen here. No reason given. Just review pending for 3 weeks. Another customer, an older black woman in a church coat, nods. "Same with my grandson's college savings. They said it was flagged. Never told us why." Langston hears all of it. The story's bubbling just beneath the surface. He knows now. This is bigger than him. It always was. "Sir," Clinton tries again. "I'm asking you one last time. You've made that clear," Langston says. "What you haven't made clear is why you never asked for my name." There's a pause. A beat that stretches just long enough to feel like a turning point. Terrence walks closer now, his phone trained on the teller window. "Let's fix that," he says. He leans over the edge of the counter slightly, peering at the drawer where the card had been taken. Before Janine can stop him, his eyes lock on the name embossed in gold. "Langston Merriweather," he reads aloud. The room falls silent. Completely. Somewhere near the investment brochures, a man exhales sharply. Another whispers, "Wait, that Langston Merriweather?" Eyes shift, heads turn. A ripple of recognition spreads like heat. Sharon speaks half under her breath. "No, it can't be." Deborah's mouth opens, then closes. For the first time, she looks unsure. Langston stands straighter, still says nothing. Terrence, still filming, keeps reading. The card says, "Executive Tier, Trinity Holdings." That's the parent company, right? Naomi steps forward, her voice steady now. "I checked the internal system," she says. "His account is real. Not just real, it's top level. You didn't even try to verify." Deborah turns on her. "You're out of line." "I'm in policy," Naomi replies. "You're out of line." The weight of her words sits heavy on the marble floor. Even Janine looks shaken now. Langston finally speaks again. "I told you I wasn't leaving." Clinton takes a half step back. The certainty in his posture begins to break. Deborah's confidence is fracturing too, visible in her trembling fingers. Langston looks at them one by one. His voice is quieter than before, but somehow even more powerful. "You're not just wrong. You're documented." There's no sound for a moment, but the faint buzz of Sharon's phone and the low hum of fluorescent lights. Then a man near the back speaks aloud. "He's the CEO." Gasps ripple outward. Another woman says, almost in disbelief, "He owns the bank." Langston doesn't confirm. He doesn't need to. The truth is already unfolding in every face. Deborah opens her mouth, maybe to deny, maybe to justify. But before she can speak, Naomi's voice cuts through, calm and absolute. "He's not just a client. He's the CEO." Langston turns slightly, only slightly, to meet Deborah's eyes. "You still have time to apologize," he says, not as a threat, but as a fact. But not much. Langston Merriweather, Terrence reads aloud. A beat. Then someone whispers, "Wait, that Langston Merriweather?" The air inside Trinity Bank's downtown Milwaukee branch no longer feels like a lobby. It feels like a courtroom. Phones are up. Murmurs are no longer whispers. Every eye in the building, including those behind glass partitions and frosted doors, are locked on the man who has been quietly standing at the center of the storm. Langston doesn't move. He doesn't nod or raise a hand. But a shift has happened, and he knows it. The room has begun to turn, not because he announced himself, but because someone else did. And that changes everything. Just minutes earlier, he was treated as an intruder. Now the people watching him are caught between disbelief and dawning recognition. And some, like Deborah, are starting to panic. She masks it poorly. Her jaw tightens, and her eyes flash toward Janine, who is frozen behind her station, fingers still near the locked drawer that holds Langston's card. Clinton has stepped back, visibly uncertain, his weight shifting from one foot to the other. Langston hears the shift not just in voices, but in posture, in breath. Recognition is beginning to chip away at the wall of arrogance that Deborah built, but the truth is only beginning to surface. He does not speak. Not yet. Terrence lowers his phone slightly, just for a moment, and says quietly to Sharon, "Is this real? Like, real? Sharon nods. "Google him." Terrence does. Within seconds, the screen lights up with search results. Langston Merriweather, founder and CEO of Trinity National Holdings. Estimated net worth, $15 billion. Architect of Community First Banking Reform. Keynote speaker at the National Equity in Finance Forum. He holds the screen up just long enough for a few nearby customers to see. Gasps follow. A woman near the potted ficus plant drops her purse. Langston's voice finally breaks the silence. It is not loud. It is not emotional. But it is final. "This branch," he says, "is under review as of 5 minutes ago." Deborah's eyes widen. "You have no authority to say that," she says, the words flying out too quickly. Naomi is already walking toward her terminal. "Actually," she says, "he does." Clinton turns his head sharply. "Wait, what?" Naomi taps her screen, keys in an internal code. Her screen refreshes. The header reads, "Executive Access, CEO Override Live." "Feed initiated by Avery Shaw," Naomi says. "It's real." Deborah's voice shakes. "You can't access that system." "I can," Naomi says, "when the CEO is in the building, and you've confirmed he is." Langston says nothing. He steps closer to the counter, not enough to threaten, but enough that every inch of his quiet presence presses against the walls of denial. Deborah turns to Janine. "Lock it down. Full escalation." But Janine doesn't move. Naomi leans slightly toward her. "You should open the drawer." Janine's fingers twitch. Her hand moves to the key in slow motion, as if every tick of movement carries weight she wasn't prepared to hold. Sharon steps closer to the barrier, filming. "You're going to want to do the right thing," she says. Janine exhales, unlocks the drawer, and places Langston's card on the counter without a word. Langston doesn't take it yet. He watches. Waits. Deborah snaps. "This is a setup." Naomi replies, "No, this is exposure." Terrence's phone buzzes. He checks the stream. "Over 100,000 views," he announces. "And counting." Langston turns his head slightly, his gaze sweeping across the space, over the cameras, the faces, the weight of realization now pressing on more than just one person. "I told you I wasn't leaving," he says again, "because I knew what I'd find here." Deborah stammers, "You're trying to trap us. You came in here to cause a scene." Langston cuts her off. "I came here to withdraw my money. You made it a scene." He looks to Naomi. "What does the system say about my account?" Naomi turns her screen toward him so everyone can hear. "Trinity Executive Client, Tier 1 access. Active for over 14 years. Current balance, well beyond 1 million. Langston nods once. Still doesn't touch the card. Deborah is shaking now, but her voice hardens out of desperation. "You could have just told us who you were." "And what would that have changed?" Langston asks. Deborah opens her mouth, but nothing comes out. "You assumed I didn't belong," Langston says. "You looked at me and decided what kind of man I was. Not based on data, not based on identity verification, based on clothing, skin, quietness." Sharon interjects. "Because they think power has a uniform." Langston looks back to the customers gathered. "This isn't about who I am," he says. "It's about who they've chosen to be." Naomi walks away from her station and stands beside him. No hesitation. "She didn't just question your identity," Naomi says. "She questioned your legitimacy, and she's done it before." Deborah's head snaps to her. "What did you say?" "You heard me," Naomi says, louder now. "Last year, a black customer came in to apply for a small business loan. You stalled him for an hour, then denied him without reviewing his file. You told me not to ask questions." The crowd shifts. Another customer murmurs, "That happened to me, too." Deborah's face begins to crumble. "I've seen it," Naomi continues, "again and again. But today, I couldn't stay quiet." Langston finally reaches for his card. He places it back into his wallet. Not with flourish, but with finality. Terrence turns the phone to face the crowd. "If you're watching this," he says to the live stream, "remember, this isn't just one bad moment. This is what bias looks like in a suit and tie." Langston walks toward the center of the lobby again, past the investment brochures, past the Bank with Confidence poster. He stops beneath a framed portrait of the bank's founder. The man in the photo is white, smiling in black and white, handshake captured mid-pose. Langston glances at it, then back to the room. "You still have time to walk this back," he says, "to admit what's happened here. But it won't be much longer." Clinton's voice is barely audible now. This wasn't supposed to happen." Naomi says to him, "No, but it did." And then Langston looks directly at Deborah. "You're not just wrong. You're documented." Her mouth opens slightly, as if to protest. But before she can speak, a voice from the teller line calls out, loud enough to pierce every corner of the lobby. "He's not just a client, he's the CEO." The room stares. Time seems to pause. Langston turns toward her slowly. "You still have time to apologize," he says, voice calm, steady. "But not much." "Effective immediately," Langston says, his voice like glass cracking in still air. "This branch is under operational lockdown." The words land not with volume, but with precision. The kind of phrase that doesn't need to be shouted to take command of a room. Silence rushes in like a tide behind it, swallowing the last whispers of disbelief that had clung to the corners of Trinity Bank's Milwaukee branch. Deborah Whitlow doesn't move. She stands behind her workstation, eyes darting to each screen, as if searching for some sliver of control she might still possess. But her power is already crumbling, pixel by pixel, as the monitor in front of her blinks and fades to black. A quiet click. A subtle flicker. The system has locked her out. Langston remains at the center of the room, no longer just the man falsely accused, but something larger. Inevitable. The quiet fire in his chest has found shape in his voice, and it's no longer just about the humiliation. It's about the repair. Deborah reaches for the phone on the wall behind her, the same one she used to summon escalation. She lifts the receiver, presses a line. Nothing. She tries again. Still nothing. Avery Shaw's voice comes through Langston's earpiece. Calm. Certain. Branch systems are locked. Staff access revoked per executive override. Emergency control active. Reuben is joining the line. Copy, Langston replies. Reuben Sinclair's voice joins the call seconds later. Steady, deliberate. Langston, you have full board backing. Proceed as necessary. Clinton Reddick steps back toward the wall, arms stiff at his sides, eyes flickering between Langston and Deborah. His face is pale now. The weight of everything that's just shifted presses on his shoulders like gravity doubling. Customers continue filming. The line near the teller windows has become a kind of gallery, witnesses to a trial they didn't know they'd be attending. Some hold phones, others simply stare, stunned, their bodies still except for the occasional tilt of a head or crossing of arms. Janine Croft reaches for the drawer, the same drawer where she locked Langston's card just 20 minutes ago. She unlocks it with trembling hands, retrieves the card, and places it on the counter. Her fingers stay there a second too long, as if unwilling to let go. Langston steps forward and retrieves the card, but says nothing to her. The time for conversation has passed. Deborah speaks at last, her voice strained and rising. You came here to set us up, to make us look bad. This isn't a transaction. It's a trap. Langston doesn't reply. He turns instead to Naomi Fields, who stands beside him now, no longer hesitant, no longer unsure. You've shown more integrity in the last 10 minutes than some people have in 10 years, he says. That doesn't go unnoticed. Naomi's eyes widen, her voice soft but steady. I didn't do it for recognition. I know, Langston replies. That's why you deserve it. He looks back at the crowd. This is not about revenge, he says, voice rising just slightly. It's about accountability. Reuben's voice comes through the phone again, louder now, as Langston lifts it just slightly from his side. Processing terminations. Deborah Whitlow, branch manager. Clinton Reddick, senior teller. Janine Croft, teller. Digital credentials revoked. Human resources notified. A sharp gasp echoes from the far end of the room. Clinton actually takes a step back and hits the wall. Janine exhales a shaky breath, shoulders crumpling. Deborah doesn't blink. She looks carved from stone, except for the pulsing vein in her neck. You can't do this, she breathes. This is illegal. Langston doesn't shout. He looks directly at her. You ran the trial yourself the moment you humiliated me over a speaker, he says. You executed the sentence the moment you tried to physically eject me from a bank I own. When Sharon, still filming, whispers into the phone, You heard that, right? That's the line. Terrence, a few feet away, murmurs, Already clipped. Already uploaded. Clinton's mouth opens as if to speak, but no words form. He lowers his head instead. For the first time, he looks like someone realizing they've burned the bridge they're still standing on. Janine unlocks her station. Her monitor goes dark. Langston turns to Naomi again. Effective immediately, he says. You're being promoted. Equity Integrity Team. Details to follow. Sharon claps. So does someone else. Then another. The applause is not loud, but it spreads like a ripple. It's not for drama. It's for justice. Naomi's eyes shimmer. Sir, thank you. Langston shakes his head gently. Thank yourself. Deborah begins to pace behind the counter now, voice rising with every step. This is a disaster. You'll lose half the staff. The board will turn on you. The media is already watching, Terrence says aloud. 200,000 views and climbing, Sharon adds. Seattle Daily already picked it up. Langston turns toward the center of the lobby, where the light falls on the polished tile beneath his boots. His reflection stares back up at him. Calm, grounded, immovable. He lifts his phone again. Avery, he says, pause all transactions. All customer appointments are to be rescheduled. No business until further notice. Confirmed, Avery replies. Branch is in operational lockdown. Access restricted to CEO and designated personnel only. Deborah lunges forward as if to say something else, but she's interrupted by the faint ping of a new notification on her workstation. Except, it doesn't come from her station. Her screen is off. The ping is from Naomi's. She glances down. It's Ruben, Naomi says. New access credentials, assigned to me. Langston nods once. You'll oversee compliance transition. Start today. The sound of Deborah's breath is ragged now. The customers are all watching her, this time not with suspicion or admiration, but with cold awareness. Langston walks slowly past the teller line, then stops. He speaks not to Deborah, not to Clinton, not even to Janine. He speaks to the room. Let this serve as notice, he says. This branch no longer tolerates bias disguised as caution or policy used as a weapon. Dignity isn't conditional, and decency is not optional. Naomi breathes in deeply, tears brimming just beneath the surface. She presses her lips together and stands taller. Langston nods to her once, then turns to the last station at the far end of the teller row. Janine's. She stands rigid, her eyes locked on the floor. You're not the only ones being recorded, he says quietly. You're being documented, logged, and witnessed. Sharon raises her phone higher. We are the witnesses. Deborah takes a step toward Langston, defiant to the last. You still need us, she says, voice thin with desperation. You think you can run this branch without staff? Langston meets her eyes. I'd rather lose staff than lose our soul. He doesn't wait for a reply. He turns, slowly, deliberately, back toward the center of the lobby. The room has changed, not just in tone or tension. Something deeper, the authority once held by uniforms and desk nameplates, has migrated. Now, it lives in the quiet steadiness of the man walking calmly through the center of it all. He pauses once more beneath the light, his face reflected in the polished floor. Terrence, standing at the back of the room, lowers his phone slightly and says aloud to the live stream, We're watching a CEO fire an entire branch for profiling him in his own bank. Langston raises his phone to his ear again. Avery, he says, let's finalize system lockout. Deborah Whitlow, Clinton Reddick, Janine Croft. Revoke building access. Mark files with disciplinary summary and no rehire notation. There's a pause. Then Avery's voice, soft but undeniable. Confirmed. Terminations processed. Systems updated. The room holds its breath. Langston looks toward the door, then turns back. But before he can speak again, Clinton takes a slow step forward, His voice is dry, fractured. "Sir, there's something you need to know." "She had a list," Ryan says. "Deborah told us who not to serve, who to delay, who to ignore." The room doesn't react immediately. It's as if every person present, every customer, every employee, every streaming viewer needs a breath to process what's just been said. The accusation floats in the silence like smoke hanging over a battlefield. And in that moment, the quiet becomes more deafening than any raised voice. Langston Merriweather doesn't flinch. He turns slowly toward the voice that just spoke. The man now stepping forward is Ryan. Mid-30s, clean-cut, pale from nerves, not arrogance. A junior teller who until now had said nothing. Done nothing. One of the quiet ones. The ones who nod and obey. But not today. Langston says nothing at first. He simply waits. Ryan swallows. His voice cracks slightly as he continues. "It wasn't written anywhere," he says, his eyes flicking toward Deborah, who stands stiff behind her station. "But we all knew. She called it selective screening." Whispers break across the room like a low tide coming in. Terrence slowly raises his phone again. The live stream hasn't stopped rolling since the moment Langston's name was read aloud. "She said to be cautious," Ryan continues, "to pay attention to customers who looked high contact or likely to dispute charges. But she never meant behavior. She meant appearance." Langston nods slightly, still watching him. "Who was on the list?" Ryan hesitates. "It wasn't names, it was types. She said if someone came in wearing street clothes or looked like they weren't sure what they wanted, we were to stall, make them wait. And if they pushed too hard, flag them for fraud." Naomi's face hardens. "I knew something was off." Sharon mutters, "They had a playbook." Janine Croft, still standing frozen near her terminal, blurts out, "He's lying! He's just trying to save himself." Ryan doesn't look at her. "I'm not. I wish I was." Deborah steps forward, voice sharp, unraveling. "That's enough. You have no proof. You're just making wild accusations because you're scared." Langston tilts his head. And why would he be scared if everything he's saying is false? Deborah opens her mouth but says nothing. Langston gestures to Naomi. "Pull up last month's complaint logs." She nods, sits at the nearest active terminal, and begins typing. The keys clack with increasing urgency. The tension returns. Thicker, more charged. "There should be a minimum of 6 logged complaints," Langston says, his tone steady. "We've had multiple customers email corporate. I reviewed the dashboard myself, but what I need to know now is what the branch kept and what it buried." Naomi hits the return key. She frowns. "There are only 2 entries," she says. Langston moves closer. "Both marked unfounded within the same hour they were submitted," she adds. "No escalation path, no investigation attached." Deborah's voice snaps. Internal complaints don't always warrant escalation. Naomi doesn't look up. "One of them says the customer was waiting for a mortgage advisor. He said he overheard staff laughing about his name, said it sounded like a made-up rapper." She scrolls. "Complaint closed in 17 minutes. Langston stares at the screen. "What about the others?" Naomi clicks into a hidden system folder. A password prompt appears. She pauses. "Deborah's login is deactivated," Naomi says. "I need authorization." Langston pulls out his phone and taps in a code. "Try now," he says. The system unlocks. The folder opens. Naomi's breath catches. 3 additional complaints, she whispers. 2 from Latino customers, 1 from a Filipino woman, all within the past 6 months, all marked for deletion. Deborah explodes. You had no right to look there! Langston's eyes cut to her. You had no right to bury them. Ryan speaks again, quieter now. She told us to be polite, to smile, but not to trust. Terrence speaks to his phone again, voice low but urgent. If you're watching this, you're not just seeing an incident. You're seeing how discrimination hides. Behind smiles, behind policy, behind selective silence. Langston walks slowly toward the center of the room. He looks at each employee, then each customer. This is what systemic bias looks like, he says. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It passes notes under desks. It deletes complaints in quiet rooms. A woman near the door, a black woman in a floral blouse, nods slowly, voice thick with emotion. My brother came in here 3 months ago, she says. Said they flagged his ID. Told him to come back with a suit and a business license. He never did. Langston looks at her gently. Can you submit that story to our office? She nods. I already did. No one replied. Deborah lunges for her now darkened workstation, slamming her hand against the blank screen. You don't understand the pressure. We have performance metrics. We had to reduce fraud cases. I was trying to protect the branch. You were protecting numbers, Langston says, not people. The line is quiet now. Even Janine has stepped away from her station. Clinton leans against the wall, his face unreadable. Langston turns to Naomi again. I want all complaints reviewed, all buried reports flagged, and I want audit logs on who closed what. Naomi nods. I'll start with the oldest. Good, Langston says, because this didn't begin today. It's just ending today. Terrence reads off the stream view count. 285,000. Hashtags trending. News outlets are sharing it. No one's looking away anymore. Langston looks back to Ryan. Why now? He asks. Why speak now? Ryan breathes in, exhales slowly. Because when you walked in, we didn't see you. We saw someone to dismiss. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. But once I saw Naomi step forward, once I heard your name, everything shifted. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Langston considers him for a long moment, then nods once. Your silence helped build this, but your voice may help undo it. The customers begin to nod, quietly murmuring among themselves. Some are crying, others just watching, recording, witnessing. Langston's phone buzzes. Avery's voice comes through. Langston, there's more. A tip just came in. Former regional manager. He's claiming this behavior was known. Langston's voice drops. Say that again. He says Deborah's methods weren't secret, Avery replies. They were tolerated, because her numbers were low risk, because she kept problem clients out of the system. Langston looks back at Deborah. Her eyes widen, her face pale now. You were praised for this? He asks, voice a whisper. Deborah stares. They knew. Langston says nothing. The silence is thick again, but now it's electric, charged, unforgiving. Sharon raises her phone once more. We're not just filming you anymore, she says to Deborah. We're documenting an institution. Langston turns toward Naomi. Tell Avery I want a full review, he says. Not just this branch, all of them. Pull complaint logs, match them against internal overrides. Any pattern, we escalate. Naomi nods. Clinton, for the first time in 20 minutes, speaks. "I didn't know it went that far," he says. Langston's reply is steady. "That's always the excuse, isn't it?" Clinton looks down. Langston walks to the center of the lobby, where his card was once locked away as if it were a stolen artifact. "This isn't just about me withdrawing $1 million, he says. "It's about all the people who came in here and were treated like they didn't belong, who were erased one by one because they didn't look the part." He stops. His voice lowers but sharpens. And now that silence is over. Then Avery's voice returns, one last time. "Langston," she says. "The anonymous tip includes a name, the executive who signed off on the complaint deletions." Langston looks up. "Who?" "We're not just firing people anymore," Langston says. "We're restructuring from the inside." The words don't rise like a rallying cry. They fall, heavy, purposeful, like stone pillars resetting the foundation. Langston Merriweather's voice is calm, deliberate, the cadence of someone who has spent a lifetime holding his breath, and finally exhaling. A few feet away, Deborah Whitlow stands frozen, her face drained of color, her blouse soaked at the collar with sweat. Clinton Reddick leans against the wall, his arms limp at his sides. Janine Croft, still speechless, looks like a statue whose base has cracked but hasn't toppled yet. But the crowd is very much alive. Phones are raised, fingers fly across screens. The Branch lobby is no longer a transactional space. It has transformed into a public hearing. Terrence Delgado continues streaming. Sharon Kleinman adjusts her mic and quietly narrates into her camera. This is the moment Trinity Bank's culture meets its reckoning. Langston doesn't look at them. Not yet. His eyes are on Naomi Fields, who stands just behind him, her chin lifted a little higher than before. "I want every regional branch pulled," Langston says, his voice carrying across the cold marble floor. "Complaint logs, override reports, internal closure notes. If the patterns are there, we don't delay. We act." Naomi nods. "We'll start with the last 24 months. Langston's phone is still live in his hand. On the other end, Avery Shaw updates the incoming data stream from the corporate servers. The board's legal team is now watching. Internal communications are paused across 6 states. The system has gone still, waiting for this one voice to decide its next breath. "I want direct oversight of every complaint marked for suppression," Langston says. "We'll build out an equity access index. It will track how we serve, not just how we sell." Avery responds. "Policy team is already drafting." Reuben Sinclair joins the line again, his tone steady but graver now. "Media coverage is expanding, Langston. CNN Business just requested a live statement." Langston doesn't respond to that. Not yet. He turns back to the room. A woman near the rear, elderly, tightly coiled gray bun, cane resting beside her purse, speaks up softly. "You say this is about the system. But what about justice? For the people already hurt?" Langston walks toward her. Not quickly. Not as a CEO, as a man who has lived this moment too many times. "There can be no real reform," he says, "without accountability first." He pauses in front of the teller line. And then, with a motion that feels heavier than any earlier declaration, he removes the executive badge from his wallet and hands it to Naomi. "From now on, all ethics reviews flow through you," he says. "No more buried complaints. No more delayed apologies." Naomi's hands shake slightly as she takes the card. Her eyes shimmer, but she nods with quiet resolve. Sharon lowers her phone just a little. "They're building something right in front of us," she whispers. But then a low voice cuts through the hum. It's Clinton. "Mr. Merriweather," he says, "there's something else I need to say." Langston turns. So does everyone else. Clinton steps away from the wall, shoulders slumped, voice unsteady. "Last fall," he begins, "Deborah implemented something she called selective screening." We didn't know what that meant at first. But then she explained. Certain customers, ones who looked like they might ask too many questions, were flagged. He hesitates, looks to Deborah, then away. She never wrote it down. She told us face to face. If they looked like they were from the wrong neighborhood, if they dressed too casually, if they didn't speak like they were from the business world, we were supposed to stall them, ask more questions, lose their paperwork if we had to. Someone in the line exhales sharply. Sharon speaks for the crowd. "You racially profiled customers for months?" Clinton nods. "We did." Deborah lurches forward. "You liar! You agreed with it! You said it made things easier!" "I was wrong," Clinton says, his voice cracking. "I was weak. But I'm not lying." Langston listens in silence. The weight of it all collects behind his eyes, not as tears, but as memories. Moments, years, faces of customers who had walked into branches like this, only to walk out smaller, unheard, unserved. "You told us to make them wait," Clinton says. "You said if they didn't have the patience, they weren't worth banking with." Deborah screams, "You're trying to save yourself." "No," Clinton says, shaking his head. "I'm trying to tell the truth before it's too late." Langston steps forward. "This is bigger than one branch," he says. "This is what happens when policy becomes prejudice, when courtesy is given only to the familiar, when suspicion is reserved for the ones who look like me." Naomi, from behind him, adds, "When silence is rewarded and courage is punished." Langston nods. "Today, that ends." He lifts his phone again. "Avery," he says, "deploy the compliance team to every branch in the region. Begin retraining protocol. Suspend all discretionary review closures until further notice. No file gets erased. No complaint gets buried." "Confirmed," Avery says. Sharon whispers into her phone, "You're watching the future of banking get rewritten." Terrence pans his camera toward the customer wall, where framed testimonials once glowed under soft light. He zooms in on one, an image of a young couple in suits shaking hands with a smiling advisor. The contrast is striking now. So stark, it hurts. A new customer steps forward, a man in a pressed uniform with a utility badge. "I was told I needed an appointment just to ask about a checking account," he says quietly. "But the guy after me got taken right in." Langston listens. "Thank you," he says. "Please stay. Your story matters." The man nods, visibly shaken. And then, slowly, Langston turns to Deborah one last time. "You didn't just profile me," he says. "You profiled hundreds. And worse, you trained others to follow you." Deborah looks stunned, as if her mouth can't catch up to her thoughts. "You didn't just discriminate," Langston continues. "You scaled it, and that will be your legacy. There is nothing left to say." Langston moves to the teller counter, the one he was almost thrown from. He places his hand on it, steady. "This space will be transformed," he says. "It won't close. It won't be erased. It will be reclaimed." He glances at Naomi. "I want this lobby turned into a place of transparency. Remove the barrier between customer and banker. Leave no walls to hide behind." Naomi nods. Sharon lifts her phone one final time and says to her viewers, "This branch didn't fall. It evolved. because someone refused to lower their standards, even when the room tried to shrink him. Langston walks to the center of the lobby. The floor reflects him clearly now, newly cleaned, empty of pretense. "If you've been watching this," he says to the room, to the stream, to the future, "ask yourself one question. If I had walked in wearing a suit, would any of this have happened?" No one answers. They don't need to. Then, at the very edge of the crowd, a voice speaks up. A younger teller, no more than 23, his voice hesitant but clear. "Sir, I think you should know something." Langston turns. "Speak freely." The young man glances around, then back at him. "Last fall, Pamela had a policy. She called it selective screening." In the end, it wasn't the title that changed the room. It was the truth. Langston Merriweather walked into a bank he owned and was treated like a stranger, like a problem to be removed. Not because he raised his voice, not because he broke a rule, but because someone saw his skin before they saw his humanity. That first injustice, the silent appraisal, the withheld courtesy, the denied transaction, wasn't loud or violent. It was cold. It was calculated. And it was practiced. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't fight fire with fire. He simply stood there, dignified and deliberate, letting the silence around him stretch long enough for the weight of the moment to settle. It was that silence, so full of strength, that stirred something in others. Naomi Fields, a young teller who had learned to survive by staying quiet, chose that day to speak. Sharon Kleinman, a white woman whose voice carried the privilege of being heard, used it to amplify the injustice. Terrence Delgado, a Latino journalist, gave the moment permanence through a live stream the world couldn't ignore. Even Ryan and Clinton, employees who once played along, stepped out from the shadows of convenience and into the light of truth. The arc of this story was never just about Langston. It was about every person who had ever been told, in subtle ways, "You don't belong here." It was about policies written in invisible ink, about smiles that masked suspicion, about systems built to filter, to stall, to discard, without ever saying why. But more than that, it was a story about what happens when someone refuses to lower their dignity to match the disrespect they're given. Langston's strength didn't erupt, it unfolded. One step, one sentence, one revelation at a time. And as it did, it exposed something ugly, that the bank hadn't just failed a man, it had failed a community. Deborah Whitlow wasn't just a bad actor. She was a product of a system that praised her for keeping complaints low and risk even lower. Her success was built on the silence of those who were never given a chance to speak. But when Langston reclaimed the room, when he didn't leave, didn't yield, didn't flinch, that silence broke. The climax didn't come with applause. It came with consequence, with firings, with policy reforms, with an executive handing over his badge to a young woman who had found her voice in the midst of injustice, with a pledge that no complaint would ever be deleted again. But the real resolution came afterward, in the stories. The woman whose brother never came back. The man in uniform turned away for asking questions. The young teller who remembered a term called selective screening and realized he had been complicit. Systemic bias doesn't always arrive with slurs or slams. It arrives in the extra forms, the extended wait times, the missing smile, the look that lingers a little too long. It hides behind phrases like, "just following policy." and it thrives in places where no one dares ask, why him? Why her? Why not them? Langston dared to ask. And in doing so, he didn't just change one branch, he changed a narrative. The difference between policy and prejudice is not the paper it's printed on. It's the people it protects, or harms. A rule that treats one group with suspicion while granting another the benefit of the doubt is not a rule. It's an excuse. Langston understood that. That's why he didn't just fight for an apology. He fought for infrastructure, for accountability, for an index that would expose what had long been buried. Because dignity isn't something you earn by fitting in. It's something you deserve by simply being human. And allyship isn't a label. It's a choice. When Naomi risked her job, when Sharon stood between Langston and the door, when Ryan confessed the truth, they weren't being heroes. They were doing what any decent person should do, refusing to let silence be the last word. The impact rippled, not because of headlines, but because of the countless quiet conversations that followed. People asked questions they'd never asked before. Branches examined their complaint logs. Systems began to shift. And for once, progress didn't come from shouting. It came from staying, from standing, from choosing to be seen. Langston never once said, "Look at me." But the world did. And maybe that's the deepest lesson of all, that the power to change a system often begins not with power, but with presence. This story didn't end in a courtroom. It ended in a lobby, with a man standing his ground and refusing to disappear, with a woman reclaiming her voice, with a team dismantling quiet cruelty brick by brick. Because justice isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a signature on a reform bill. Sometimes it's a new wall policy. Sometimes it's a teenager telling their parent, "I watched something today, and it made me think." That is how culture changes. Slowly, persistently, from the inside out. And Langston's story, it is now a part of that change. His philosophy remains. Leadership isn't about power, it's about presence. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in it, or someone you know, leave a comment below with the number 1. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear the next story. Because these stories matter. Because truth deserves a witness. Because dignity deserves a voice. And because silence, finally, has met its match.